Greetings good people, and a very warm welcome to you all. Now this Omega Dynamic belongs to a gentleman who has been wearing it for a quarter of a century and he's never had it opened or serviced. He loves this watch because it suits his eyesight, especially with his huge non-reflective hour markers on a matte black background. The case and bracelet aren't too bad, but he did manage to scratch up the clasp when trying to remove the clasp pin so he could take some pictures of the case back to send to me. So it's my fault. The spring bar broke and went flying, so he managed to install another one which pokes out of the sides. I'll show you why this happens and how to resolve it later, which may be really obvious to many but can sometimes baffle others. The main complaint was that he'd have to wear the watch and walk around for ages doing star jumps and all sorts to get the watch running, whereas previously he'd pick it up, give it a little shake and off it went. It's also not accurate when it does get going. There are some marks to the glass, but for a watch that has never been opened, I can see something on the dial. Or is that my eyes deceiving me? Now to me it's no surprise that a watch can keep going for 25 years without an oil change, but sooner or later it's gonna show you the middle finger and say, sod this mate, I didn't sign up for this. It's supposed to get me oil changed every 3 to 5 years, and here we are 25 years later and I'm dry as a bone. You can star jump all you like, but I quit. Poor little mate, I feel your pain. My bones are dry too. Now what's this on the Faraday cage? Again, some signs that something may have tried to creep into this thing at some point, or it could be from the factory. I definitely see a couple of fingerprints on this case back, and here you can see that something moist has just managed to creep across that gasket. The owner did say that he spent a lot of time in tropical humid climates.
What, you mean like Birmingham?
Like Birmingham, cheeky. Oh yeah, that looks like a 2892, one of my favourites. So although this calibre is known as the Omega 1108, it is in fact an ETA 2892-A2, and out of all the 2800 family of ETA movements, this one has to be my favourite. And you know that meme about your mate crying after buying an expensive Hublot because he realised it has an ETA movement inside? Well, that movement is probably a 2892. I do need to lever just underneath this cock here to remove the balance, but we've got this case ring here that's blocking our access, so let's remove that, which is held in with these two clips. So I mentioned Hublot, and I myself have owned and sold other top brands such as Frankmuller, who also use the 2892 in their entry-level models such as the Casablanca. Other brands such as Tudor, IWC, Breitling, Panerai and many others have used this movement or used it as a tractor to drive a piggyback chronograph module. It's a great movement. Now I can lever it just here. The 2892 is a slim and reliable movement which can be tuned to perform with great accuracy. We've got it now. It's silky smooth, unlike the 2824, and is a whole millimeter thinner, which is a lot considering we have whole movements that are only a millimeter in total. Before we lose it, just remove that. Now let's check out this dial. The slim design also makes it an ideal candidate to slap on chronograph modules to its back. So you'll find a lot of chronographs from the likes of Tag Heuer, Breitling, Oris, Longines and many others with a 2892 base. This particular one has been decorated by Omega with the Cote de Genève and perlage, but other brands will go even further and add gold coloured chatons, better shock settings and extra jewels to reduce friction and increase performance. So my concern was these patches here. So after removing the movement from the case, I can see something that has settled on the dial. I'm not quite sure what it is, but first I'll just remove the hands and then see if it will wipe off. The watch has never been opened, so it could be related to the other little telltale signs of unlawful entry that we saw earlier. So I take a brand new unused piece of Rodico to avoid any further contaminants, and with a sigh of relief it seems to be coming off. Now the Omega Dynamic series has a bit of a bad rep amongst collectors, which then feeds down to the general public, and that's down to its predecessors. The first generation Dynamic was released in 1968 and it looks like this. President Kennedy announced the space race in 1961, so you can imagine from 1961 to 1969 when the blockbuster production was released. The world was all about outer space and Omega bought the whole product placement slots in said production. So maybe that's where they were going with this whole flying saucer squashed moon design. But when it was released, it did really well. And maybe that was down to the space fever that had gripped the population of the world. A glimpse into the future. Omega described the Dynamic as the first watch designed for the human wrist. Say what? You mean everyone else has been designing watches for the ankles all these years? Have I been wearing my watch on the wrong? First watch designed for the human wrist. I think they're just trying it on, trying to justify their case design, which looks like it just swallowed a football sideways. And I mean an American football, or a rugby ball as it's known by the rest of the world. Why'd you all call it football over there when you clearly use your hands?
Yeah, it's just rugby with bubble wrap, isn't it? Let's be honest.
I'd have to agree. The Dynamic was then discontinued as the shape became outdated, probably because the space race had faded and the quartz crisis and digital watches were about to run riot for the next decade or so. The integrated strap was also a bit restrictive in design and one of the reasons why people are put off by it today. Omega did try again in the 1980s with the Dynamic second generation, nicknamed the Spider, with quartz movements, but the case design was still a bit bonkers and it didn't do too well, so Omega binned it again. But in 1995, Omega tried again with the third generation Dynamic, but instead of going back to the future, they went back to the past, like World War II past, and decided to take a more sensible approach with the case design. And that's the Omega Dynamic we are working on today, with this World War II inspired military style dial with big loomed hour markers on a matte black dial. Sadly, the third gen was also ended after a 4-year production run in 1999. Right, so the movement is disassembled and I just have a few sub-assemblies to do. I haven't shown me drilling out all of the screws in this episode, but I will add the technical sheet to my website joesblogs.com so you can follow along and see all the oiling points and types of oils needed. You'll also find a nice selection of specially curated watches for sale on there. So throughout the disassembly we saw well preserved, nicely decorated bits of metal, but you may have missed all the bits of dried oil, gunk and debris sprinkled all over the place. Here is a prime example of dried congealed oil, which is probably the root cause for this watch not performing. And people have used the car analogy a lot when it comes to service and maintenance of your timepiece. You wouldn't drive your car around for 25 years without servicing it. It's a bit drastic to use that as an example, but I'll end that sentence with a but. Just changed all my bloody solutions, so I don't want all that getting back in there. So could give it a little clean or a little pre-wash. It's just old oil. Bone dry. So easy for you because you got so many tools and parts already.
What subjects would I need to pick though for my exam if I want to become a watchmaker?
Maybe some maths and some...
Maths, science probably.
Yeah.
And
Cooking. What have you been up to, mate?
nothing much.
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Look at that burr. That shouldn't be there. Dearie me. That's not what you expect from her.
What?
So who shall we blame? ETA or Omega? Well, they're both owned by Swatch, so they're all to blame. Okay, so let's give this case and bracelet a good wash to remove any dirt and grime. Then we can see what we need to do. The case and bracelet aren't too bad And Philip, the owner of this watch, has asked me to do what I think is right. He did want the clasp polished for sure though, I suppose, so he doesn't have to be reminded of his own handiwork. So we'll be sympathetic and just spruce and tidy everything up for him. It doesn't need much really. Everything on this watch has a brushed finish, which is in keeping with that military look, so we'll apply the same finish. And even though straight graining is basically applying organized scratches to the metal, we can't just do that over the existing disorganized scratches. So first we need to remove all the scratches which are sitting in every direction, and then we apply scratches in one cohesive direction. And that's how you get a good brush look. Tip number 1. But oh dear, look at my wheel. This is another tip for you to get a good result with your polishing. Make sure your mops are always dressed well. I was working on another project which caused this unevenness to my wheel, but for this job it needs to be flat. So I use a grinding stone to dress this hard wheel, and once I'm done you can see how flat it is with the workpiece. So now that the wheel is nice and flat, I apply a bit of cutting compound and remove all the scratches from the clasp. So here we can see there are still some scratches left, and you may be tempted to just apply the brush finish, convincing yourself that they'll blend in, but trust me, it's better just to remove them. Here again you can see the front face of the clasp looks pretty clean, but there are still some scratches left around the edges, and these will show up even with a brush finish. If you use your brushing wheel for cutting, then you can eventually remove the scratches, but you will end up removing unnecessary metal from your workpiece and shorten the lifespan of your wheel. The wheel should only be used to apply the finish, not to cut out the scratches. This wheel I have here is over 10 years old. If you use it to remove scratches, then it will probably last you a few months. So you saw how clean the clasp was, which now makes the brushing easy, and it should only take a few seconds. I'll do half of this clasp just to show you the difference. We've also managed to remove any evidence of emergency tinkering on the sides. Right, so the parts are all nice and clean, and I'm going to start off with all the little sub-assemblies. So I'll start off with the mainspring, And since this is an automatic mainspring, we need to add some braking grease to the walls of the barrel. When you're manually winding a manual wind mainspring, you can feel it when it is fully wound. It just won't wind anymore. If you try to go beyond that point by force, then you will snap the mainspring. But on an automatic watch, the mainspring is constantly winding every time you move your wrist. So when it's fully wound, it needs to be able to just spin round in the barrel in its fully wound state. So unlike the manual wind mainspring, which is hooked onto the wall of the barrel, the automatic mainspring is not, and needs that bit of help from the grease to be able to slip round when needed. Now I assemble the barrel bridge. In many movements, the ratchet wheel and crown wheel sit on top of the barrel bridge, but on this movement everything sits tidily underneath. And again, all the oiling points and oils are on the technical sheet, which I'll add to my website and link it to this video so you can follow along. I may have missed some steps or oiling points in the editing, so it's also good to have your own technical sheet to work from. I then have one more sub-assembly to do, which we won't need until much later, and that is the automatic works. But it's good practice to just get it all done before you start assembling the movement. And here I am, just oiling up the reversing wheel with some D5. I also oil up all the posts with some D5, and then I start off with the intermediate reduction wheel, followed by the reduction wheel, then the reversing wheel, and the reverser. The lower bridge to keep this all in place also has this long post, and that's where the auxiliary reverser will sit, which we can get on once the bridge is installed. Once the lower bridge is secure and we've tested the operation, we can oil up the top and bottom jewels. And here is the auxiliary reverser. You will have noticed on some movements you can just unbolt the rotor from the automatic bridge, but on this movement the bridge has to be removed first in order to get access to the screws for the rotor. And I suppose some of these design elements, including the barrel bridge design with everything underneath, may have been necessary to reduce the overall thickness of this movement. So now that all the sub-assemblies are complete, we can finally start assembling this movement. The original 2892 started life in 1975 amidst the quartz crisis, and it gained popularity amongst luxury brands because of its slim design, which was simple, with less parts, easy to service, easy to tune. It was robust, and it had features in the 70s which we take for granted today, such as the hacking feature, quick set date, and so on. You may have been shocked at some of the brands I mentioned earlier who have used the 2892, such as Hublot, Panerai and Tudor, but Cartier have also used it in the Ballon Bleu, Bulgari, Tiffany & Co, Beau Mercier, Rado, Maurice Lacroix, Montblanc, Hamilton, and I could go on and on and on. I'm surprised Rolex didn't use it. I bet they wanted to though. Honestly, this movement is good and is the reason why it survived the quartz crisis and adopted and loved by so many brands. And although the Swatch Group has now banned all other brands from accessing their movements who are not part of the Swatch Group, there are other manufacturers such as Sellita who are still producing versions of this movement. You can see how little that train wheel bridge is, and it's held in with one screw. And after I've oiled up the jewels on this side, I'm already onto the other side. Simple, efficient, easy. You'll notice the keyless components do share similarities with other family members in the 2800 range, and even other ranges in the ETA lineup, including some quartz movements. And I suppose that's natural. Some components, like the keyless and calendar parts, can just be transferred over onto other movements without needing a drastic redesign. So if you go back and look at the Moondust Tag Heuer I did with the quartz movement, you will see the same looking components on the keyless and calendar works. And that's it. I'm going to move around like that. And I'm sure we all remember this seahorse dolphin yoke from my other videos, and is one of those recognizable parts used on ETA movements. And this cannon pinion with the driving wheel is also another common trait on ETA movements and needs to be greased really well. This will drive the minute hand, but importantly it will enable smooth hand adjusting. Sometimes when you're trying to adjust the hands on your watch and it feels like you're about to rip some teeth, it's most likely because of this part being clogged up or being too dry. Now I oiled up most of the jewels on this dial side when I first turned it over, but if you haven't done it yet, it's best to oil them before you go any further, because some of the calendar components will restrict access to some of those jewels. This is one of the craziest fonts I've seen on a 2892 date disc. I love it. It may be fiddly to install this date jumper and its cover plate to secure the date disc, so instead you could secure the date disc first with the additional small maintaining plate, but me, I'm a masochist and love the pain, so I do it the fiddly way. And this is the additional maintaining plate I was talking about. So that's it, dial side done, and now we go back onto the other side to install the palette and balance. Easy as Larry. Oof. Smooth, just like a silk. Soft and cuddly, hug me up like a quilt. Boom! So this flimsy bit of brass is the hacking lever. Make sure the tip is seated in between the clutch, and you can see the simplicity of its function. It's just like a doorstop. It intrusively sticks its leg on the balance wheel, stopping it from oscillating. Technology! So this is what it looks like before everything has had a chance to settle down, and this is what it looks like after a little tune-up. It's good. I did pressure test the case using the old gasket and it seemed fine, but just to be safe I'll stick a fresh one on and do another pressure test.
It's good.
Now these Faraday cages are made of a special conductive alloy, so whatever stained this cage has stained it good, and I don't want to go crazy trying to remove it as this will scratch it up, so I move on, just making sure there's nothing loose on the surface that could later fall off into the movement. So the reason why your spring bar sticks out of the side of your clasp is because you've used the wrong type of spring bar. The double shouldered or double flanged spring bars are usually for the lugs and they have a longer tip, so by the time the flange butts up against the inside of the clasp hole it's already poking out halfway. For the clasp you need to use a single flange spring bar which has a shorter tip, so by the time it's butting up against the inside of the clasp hole wall the short tip stays level with the thickness of the clasp. You could file down the tip on a double shouldered spring bar to get around this, but sometimes the tips on the double shouldered bars are also slimmer in diameter, so be mindful of that. And that's it really friends, a nice and easy one for you today. No major dramas as you would expect from a relatively modern piece. It has since gone back to its happy owner and I don't expect to see it for another 25 years. But at least now he won't have to do jumping jacks just to get this watch started. Well, thank you for your company today and I hope you all found this one useful. Take care friends, end the occupation and the Death Star. Tra.